Hey there everybody, it's AJ of the Mighty Gluestick channel. How's it going? This is an unscripted video inspired by a comment from a suggestion from King Stewie. Thanks King Stewie, that's a good idea. Where I review classic movies, classic fantasy movies, and how I have used them in my Dungeons & Dragons game. So I'm going to be covering one of the best role-playing experiences I've ever had as Dungeon Master, which was based on the movie The Dark Crystal. So what happened in the game was a character whose god was a trickster god decided that he was going to try and pull one over and trick his trickster god, and the trickster god pulled a real great trick on him by actually sending him into a trap which fractured reality. And the characters came across, by walking down these various corridors that came off from this central chamber, they encountered alternate reality versions of themselves from like where events had happened differently, and it ended up that I was sitting back and watching these guys interact with their own alternate characters and having conversations by themselves in character with different versions of their own characters. And I sat there for a good 10 minutes not doing a damn thing, just sitting back and enjoying watching the show as they were completely immersed in the situation. In the end, I kind of had to step in because I had to track where everybody was going, because each corridor they walked down, they were walking down a different reality into a different universe, and there was a potential that they would lose their original characters once they fixed this trap and put reality back together again. So it was kind of dangerous in that regard, and it took a lot of record keeping from me to make sure that I knew exactly where the original characters had ended up, and that they didn't end up forming a new party out of characters from completely different universes, because that kind of disconnect would create an existential crisis with the character, where the player would disconnect and not really take them too seriously. So it was fun, and it was very confusing because the players had to figure out what was going on. And in the end, they came across the source of the problem, which was a crystal, a crystal chamber from the Dark Crystal. Basically, they crossed over into the Dark Crystal world inside the Skeksis castle, and there was the Dark Crystal that they had to shatter to basically fix reality for them, because the crystal was forming an anchor point which was pulling in these alternate universes and tying them together in this crossed over corridor. So it was a great sort of homage to that movie and that situation. So in the Dark Crystal, you have this big crystal which is so magically powerful that it's actually holding reality together, and it's got a custodian species that look after this perfect crystal. But because of their hubris, they fight amongst themselves, and in the process they hit the crystal, break off a shard from it, and now the crystal is no longer perfect, and so there's a shard of the crystal, and the crystal is broken. Therefore reality is somewhat broken, and a darker aspect to it. And also the species that are custodians and intimately tied to the crystal break into two separate species who are actually linked and the same. One is the peaceful mystics, and the other is the evil Skeksis. I think there's a listing for a Skeksi-like creature in the Tome of Beasts, which I may cover later. And the story basically revolves around a species which is prophesied, the Gelflings, to fix the crystal and therefore end the Skeksis' existence. So the Skeksis have hunted the Gelflings to near extinction. There's only 2 of them left. And the story revolves around them as the heroes who put the shard of the crystal back into the Dark Crystal, forming the Light Crystal once again. The mystics who have predicted that this is actually going to happen and have journeyed all the way there, some of them dying along the way as their Skeksi counterparts get destroyed. So too do they, because they're intimately bound together. And it all culminates in this marvelous scene with a conjunction of all the stars around this planet, and the beam of light shoots down from all the conjunction stars through the castle chamber, hits the crystal, and draws all of these things together, and the crystal is healed once more. So the idea that reality itself being anchored on this one crystal is quite an amazing concept, and really works well in a role-playing game. And you can have artifacts that warp reality and direct reality around them. They're so powerful. The ties of the weave of magic are centered on it, so that fate actually coils around the object itself. So yeah, it sort of directs its fate. So that's the Dark Crystal for you. That's really good. Krull is a great movie that I really enjoy, and that's the idea for Krull is that you have a big bad guy that actually spawns his own minions, and the minions themselves are an army that sort of are an unending force, because once you kill one of the Krull soldiers, their alien invader, their brain case cracks open, and some sort of slimy alien slug goes into the ground, travels back to the central castle, which exists in a extra-dimensional flux, so it moves around each dawn. It changes to another location on the planet, and the location is unpredictable, so it can only be tracked by using a prophet, somebody who can use clairvoyance to see into the future. And of course the Dark Lord is a magical being who has brutally crushed anybody who can see into the future to protect his fortress lair. And in the end, a prophesized weapon of great magical power is given to the son of a king. And he travels to the Dark Crystal Tower fortress, the alien being's fortress, the Beast, to save his princess and kill the Beast, and therefore kill the Beast and you kill all of his minions at the same time, and also the power that holds the whole fortress in place and actually on the world itself. And once he kills that, it has this fantastic scene where it just is breaking apart and falling it down around them as they run out of the place, and then it flies up into space like it was never there in the first place. Also in Conan the Destroyer, there is a great scene where he's traveling with a princess to go to a she's actually destined to be a sacrifice for a dark god that starts off as a perfect statue, and once an artifact is reunited with the statue, it turns back into this ancient evil god, which is kind of fun. But along the way they come across a temple, a wizard's castle floating on a lake. It seems to be made out of crystal and ice and mirrors, which in fact it's actually all illusions created, I would imagine, with some sort of empowered permanent creation spell. And this also is centered on a jewel that he uses to scry the world around him, and also to maintain the illusions themselves. And in the end, Conan, of course, has this classic scene where he sees this creature in multiple mirrors, and then it steps out of the multiple mirrors. The parts all come together and then throw back the hood, and he's transformed himself into a beast that gets into a mano-a-mano wrestling match with Conan. Then Conan figures out the only way he's going to beat this thing is to break the mirrors, and each time he breaks a mirror, he creates a slashing wound across this beast. And so there's this great scene where he smashes all the mirrors, and the thing kind of falls apart, and then there's one mirror left over, and he realizes, there's two mirrors left over. One has the wizard standing behind it, the other has his companions, and Conan has a snap decision of which mirror am I going to throw my sword through, and in the end he makes the right decision, pierces runs the wizards through with his sword. The wizard comes out and has his little monologue, and then carks it, and the crystal breaks, and the entire place starts to come apart, and they all have to run out of there as fast as they can. And the classic line from the wizard that's with Conan's party saying, "All an illusion." I love that scene. Finally, last movie is Dragon Slayer. Now in this one, there's a great trick that a wizard uses to he basically creates a soul jar out of a magical gem, and gives this gem to his apprentice after he's been killed by a guy who says, "Oh, are you some sort of a wizard?" And he's like, "Yep, I'm the real deal. You can take this knife and stab it into me, and I'll survive." And the guy's like, "Fine." Stabs him, and the wizard dies. And everybody's like, "What? That wasn't supposed to happen." And in the end, this wizard apprentice uses his magical crystal to do all sorts of magical stuff and defeat a dragon which has been threatening the entire region. And of course, the guy who's tasked with basically hunting down wizards is of the opinion that everything is fine, wizards are bad, they're the source of magic. With magic you get magical creatures, we don't want any more dragon problems, and every time a wizard comes along and the local villagers come and pay these guys to come and bother the dragon, everything just gets worse for us. We've got a nice system here where we've got a lottery where everybody takes a coin, and the unlucky person has their daughter sacrificed to this dragon. Of course, the local city blacksmith has disguised his daughter has taken on the role of a man, and has disguised herself as a man for years, and nobody is the wiser apparently. And of course, the wizard apprentice falls in love with this man who turns out to be a woman. And the blacksmith has spent his time in his youth crafting a magical spear weapon of amazing sharpness. And there's this great scene where they use the magical amulet that the apprentice has to magically sharpen and reforge this weapon into a magical weapon, which is great. It's a brilliant scene where he cuts the anvil in half with this magical blade. And then he goes in there, and one other aspect of this movie is that you think it's like stereotypical of like 1980s movies where the monster is just sort of a claw or something that you see in the background. And the movie maintains this illusion that it's a low budget sort of movie most of the way through until the wizard apprentice gets into the actual caves of the dragon. And there's these crappy little puppet dragon babies that he interacts with. And then the dragon comes out and there's an actual fight with the dragon. And it's a full-on, like, it's one of the best representations of a fire-breathing major drake that I can think of, and it's great. And the wizard's like talking, and the start of the movie he's talking about, oh yes, I remember this is an old dragon. Old dragons are angry, mean creatures because their bodies are like, you know, calcified, and the scales don't fit together very well. They've got arthritis, and it's an unpleasant existence for them. So they just want to kill everything. I'm like, yeah, give it a personality, give it a reason why it's a cantankerous beast that'll kill anything that comes near it. So it's a really good movie. And the fight in the end, the wizard has given the apprentice the instructions that where there's a place of fire and water, cast his ashes into there. And that's his sole instructions. The apprentice has no idea why, but he goes into the cave, and sure enough, there's a pool with like methane and stuff on fire. So there's fire and water. He throws the wizard's ashes into the water. Then the soul jar is triggered. The gem spurts out, and this green flame coalesces into the wizard's body as he's reborn in physical form. And then he goes and fights this dragon. And it's an epic fight where the wizard goes up on top of the mountain, and he causes he shouts out, the clouds part, and he's looking around for this dragon. The dragon's coming in and hitting him with fire and things like that. And the wizard just arrogantly dismisses the flame, like, don't even try that with me, buddy. And finally he realizes the only way to beat this dragon is actually to sacrifice himself. And at the end of the movie, that's exactly what happens in this great scene. So all in all, like, you think it's a cheesy movie, but it's actually a really good movie, and it's a great representation of a low-level character getting involved in a high-level character's campaign, basically, and the end run of a character where he takes on an epic fight with a big beastie. And there's nothing wrong with that if you have the low-level characters getting involved with a high-level character group and actually forming a support role, so they're part of a very important event. The threat of their death is very, very real the entire time because they're actually way over their head. But the higher level characters kind of cushion them from the brunt of the big bad guy, and their job really is to take care of the minions and the other scrappy problems, and do set things that the high level characters want and need them to do. Otherwise, the high level characters are going to fail. And there's a campaign like that I'm involved in at the moment. My home game is kind of like that. We're playing multiple characters. One of them is very, very high level characters who are taking on a threat so huge that it's actually killed the gods of our world. And then the other characters that we're playing are time travelers who have gone back in time to stop this event from happening, or to at least aid or weaken the big bad guy sufficiently so that our high level characters at the end of the campaign can fight him and win. So it's a timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly sort of campaign. So yeah, Krull, The Dark Crystal, Conan the Destroyer, and Dragon Slayer are all movies that I highly recommend as a good watch, and also a really good inspiration for certain aspects of your game. Another thing from Krull, of course, a notable mention is the fire mares, classic scene of these creatures that can travel 50 leagues or 100 leagues in a day by traveling so fast across the ground that they can actually leap through the air and travel flying on hooves of flame. That's a brilliant scene. And also the tragic story of the Cyclops in the movie, where the story goes that they bargained with the beast and his magical power to give them prophesizing powers. But of course, it's not in the beast's interest that anybody can prophesy and see where the location of his fortress is going to be. So he did a sneaky deal, took their eye, and instead the only thing that they could see is the time of their death, their own death. and they have a choice. They can either die peacefully in a certain time, or if they go against that prophecy, they will always die a nasty, horrible death. So that was a really good sort of sub-story arc of that tragic character in the story, which I really liked. Alrighty, that's about it for this little episode. If you like this sort of chat conversation about plots and things that you can use in your game and inspiration from movies and things, let me know in the comment section down below. And let me know also, I'm of great interest in what movies you find inspiring for Dungeons & Dragons, whether it's more modern ones or some old ones which I haven't seen before, that I'd love to hear your stories and how they've influenced your game and, yeah, how you've used them. So let me know, everyone. I'm keenly curious. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you again soon.